They judged her the moment she walked in, but they never imagined she held the keys to the entire empire. The automatic doors slid open, revealing a grand lobby adorned with marble floors and towering columns. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers. A poised woman in her early 50s stepped inside. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her designer bag perched neatly on her arm. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer and matching trousers, her presence was as commanding as it was graceful. The lobby seemed to pause. Conversations hushed, eyes darted toward her, and then quickly away. The receptionist, a young man with a neatly pressed uniform, straightened up behind the desk. His smile was polite but strained, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to the Chancellor Hotel," he said, his tone overly formal. "Do you have a reservation?" She nodded, her voice calm. "Yes, under Elaine Hart." He glanced at his computer screen, his fingers hovering uncertainly over the keyboard. "Ah, Ms. Hart," he said after a beat as though surprised. "You've booked a suite with us." His voice carried the faintest edge, as if the words "with us" held more weight than they should. "Yes," Elaine replied simply, her tone unwavering. She slid her ID across the counter. The receptionist processed her check-in with exaggerated precision, his eyes flicking between her and the screen as if double-checking her validity. When he handed her the key card, his fingers brushed hers briefly, and he flinched slightly, recovering with a quick, nervous laugh. "Enjoy your stay." Elaine offered a gracious smile, her poise unshaken, and moved toward the elevators. But as she walked away, she felt the heat of curious gazes trailing her. By the time the elevator doors closed behind her, whispers had begun to spread among the staff. But Elaine didn't need to hear them to know exactly what was being said. Elaine's suite was stunning, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The decor was tasteful, with plush furniture and carefully chosen art pieces. Yet, as she set her bag down on the sleek leather couch, the faint sting of her earlier interaction lingered. It wasn't new, but it never quite stopped being jarring. She decided to order room service. Picking up the phone, she requested a light dinner and a pot of tea. The voice on the other end of the line was pleasant enough, but there was a slight pause when she gave her room number, as though confirming she wasn't a mistake in the system. When her meal arrived, the server, a young woman in her 20s, hesitated at the door. She glanced inside the suite, her eyes subtly scanning the room, as if expecting to see someone else. Elaine thanked her with a warm smile, but the server's polite facade didn't hide her unease. The next morning, Elaine ventured down to the lobby for a coffee. The barista took her order without issue, but a group of guests nearby stared openly. A man in a tailored suit whispered something to the woman next to him, who gave a faint smirk. Elaine could feel the weight of their judgment, unspoken yet palpable. She held her head high, ignoring the heavy stares, and returned to her suite. Later that afternoon, she visited the hotel's boutique shop. The clerk greeted her with a tight smile, trailing her through the store under the guise of assistance. Elaine reached for a silk scarf, and the clerk immediately chimed in, "That's quite an expensive piece." Elaine turned to her, her expression calm. "It's lovely. I'll take it." The clerk hesitated, then nodded quickly, fumbling to ring up the purchase. Elaine handed her card over without a word, her movements deliberate and composed. Despite her resolve, the steady stream of microaggressions took its toll. Elaine had come here to relax, but the environment left little room for ease. But instead of letting the negativity consume her, she decided it was time to address the issue directly. That evening, Elaine made her way to the concierge desk, her steps deliberate and unhurried. The lobby was busy, with guests bustling around and staff rushing to meet their needs. Yet, as she approached, the atmosphere shifted again, like a ripple spreading across still water. Heads turned, whispers started, and glances flicked her way. The concierge, An older man with neatly combed silver hair and a practiced smile greeted her with an air of formality. "Good evening, ma'am. How may I assist you?" Elaine met his gaze, her voice steady and calm. "I'd like to speak with the owner of the hotel." His polite expression faltered, just for a moment. "The owner?" he echoed, as though he hadn't heard her correctly. "Yes," she said. "I'd appreciate it if you could arrange a meeting." The concierge hesitated, glancing toward the front desk manager, who was observing the interaction with thinly veiled curiosity. "May I ask what this is regarding?" he said finally, his tone laced with polite doubt. Elaine tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "I believe it's important." The manager approached then, his posture exuding authority. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" he asked, his tone carrying just a hint of condescension. "No problem at all," Elaine replied, her voice unwavering. "I'd simply like to meet the owner." The manager exchanged a quick look with the concierge, a flicker of amusement passing between them. "I see," he said, his smile tight. "Unfortunately, the owner isn't available for casual meetings." "It's not casual," Elaine said, her tone remaining polite but firm. "And I'm willing to wait." A small crowd of staff had begun to gather at the edges of the lobby, their curiosity barely disguised. The manager's lips pressed into a thin line, and he finally relented with a nod. "Very well. I'll see what I can do." Elaine thanked him and returned to her suite. As the elevator doors closed behind her, she could feel the weight of the staff's speculation following her, but little did they know this meeting would be anything but ordinary. The next morning, Elaine was informed that the owner would meet her in one of the private conference rooms near the lobby. She arrived early, her steps composed, her expression calm. By the time she entered the room, a small crowd of staff had subtly gathered nearby, their curiosity clearly piqued. They whispered amongst themselves, certain she was about to receive a polite dismissal. Elaine took a seat at the polished oak table, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Moments later, the general manager walked in, his demeanor professional yet smug, as though he was about to handle an unnecessary complaint. He closed the door behind him and offered her a rehearsed smile. "Ms. Hart," he began, "I understand you requested to meet with the owner. Unfortunately, they are unavailable today, but as the general manager, I am more than capable of addressing any concerns you may have." Elaine regarded him for a moment, letting the silence stretch just enough to make him shift uncomfortably. Then, in a measured tone, she said, "You seem to be mistaken. I am the owner." The manager blinked, his confident smile faltering. I beg your pardon?" Elaine leaned back slightly, her voice steady. "I purchased this hotel a year ago as part of a broader initiative to create inclusive and welcoming spaces. Clearly that vision hasn't been realized." The weight of her words hung in the air. Outside the conference room, the gathered staff froze, their whispers silenced, as if they'd collectively held their breath. "I've observed behaviors here that are unacceptable," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "The subtle judgments, the dismissive attitudes, the microaggressions. These are not just lapses in professionalism, they are failures of character, and they do not align with the standards I expect from my staff." The manager opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His composure cracked further as Elaine stood, her presence towering despite her average height. Her voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable authority. "This hotel has the potential to be exceptional," she said. "But that will never happen if the people who run it cannot treat every guest with respect, regardless of their background, appearance, or assumptions." Elaine stepped toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. She glanced back at the manager, whose face was flushed with embarrassment. "We're having a staff meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. I expect everyone to be there. Changes are coming, and they start now." She opened the door, and the staff scattered, pretending to be busy. Elaine walked through the lobby with the same quiet grace she had when she first arrived. But now the air was different, The whispers were gone, replaced by stunned silence. But Elaine wasn't finished yet. There was more to be done. The next morning, every staff member gathered in the grand ballroom, their expressions ranging from nervous to curious. Elaine stood at the front, impeccably dressed as always, exuding the same poise that had unsettled so many just days before. A large projector screen behind her displayed the hotel's logo, a symbol of elegance now tied to a newfound sense of accountability. She began without preamble. "Good morning. I'm Elaine Hart, the owner of the Chancellor Hotel. I've chosen to remain anonymous since purchasing this establishment, hoping to observe its operation organically. What I've seen is troubling." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. Some staff members shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned forward, their interest piqued. "Hospitality is not just a business, it's an art," she said, her voice steady but carrying a distinct weight. "It's about making every person who walks through these doors feel valued and welcome. Yet what I've experienced here is a culture of exclusion, a culture that undermines not only the dignity of our guests, but the very values this hotel should stand for." She let her words sink in before continuing. "I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to change this." Effective immediately, we're implementing a comprehensive training program focused on inclusion, respect, and the principles of true hospitality. Each of you will be required to attend, regardless of your role. She paused, scanning the room. "Additionally, I will be establishing an anonymous feedback system for staff and guests alike. This will allow concerns to be addressed promptly and without fear of retaliation." A few staff members exchanged glances, murmuring softly. Elaine raised a hand, and the room fell silent again. "If you believe this is asking too much, you are free to leave. But if you stay, understand that we are building something bigger than a luxury hotel. We are creating a space where every person feels they belong. That includes you, our team." There was a shift in the room, subtle but undeniable. Some nodded slightly, others sat straighter, a flicker of understanding crossing their faces. "And one last thing," Elaine added. "I didn't come here to demand perfection. I came here to demand effort. Growth is messy, and mistakes will happen, but what matters is how we learn and move forward." The meeting concluded with a round of applause, hesitant at first, but growing stronger. Elaine remained composed, though a small smile tugged at her lips. As the staff dispersed, the manager from the day before lingered, his expression humbled. He approached Elaine, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Ms. Hart, I had no idea. I'm sorry for my behavior." Elaine looked at him for a moment, her gaze unreadable. Then she extended her hand. "Apology accepted. Let's focus on what comes next." He shook her hand, his posture less rigid, and walked away. Elaine watched him go, feeling a glimmer of hope. But this wasn't just about one hotel. Her mission had only just begun. Elaine stood by the window of her suite later that evening, looking out at the bustling streets below. The city's lights flickered like stars, a reminder of the countless lives intersecting in this one small corner of the world. She felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, not from having asserted her authority, but from planting the seeds of something meaningful. The journey to this moment hadn't been easy. For years, she had faced similar situations, moments where her competence and worth were questioned based on nothing more than assumptions. But instead of bitterness, Elaine chose purpose. She knew that real change required more than words. It needed action, consistency, and patience. The next morning, as she checked out, the same receptionist who had hesitated to welcome her now greeted her with genuine warmth. "Ms. Hart, it's been an honor having you here. We hope to see you again soon." Elaine smiled, her response sincere. "I'm sure you will." As she stepped outside, the cool morning air filled her lungs, carrying with it the promise of a new day. Elaine didn't just own hotels, She owned the belief that dignity and respect should be non-negotiable, no matter where you came from or who you were. Her story is a reminder that change often begins with one person willing to stand firm, speak up, and lead with grace. It challenges us all to confront our own biases, to be better, and to demand better. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. So the next time you encounter a moment of prejudice or unfairness, ask yourself, how can I choose grace? How can I make a difference? If this story moved you, share it, discuss it, and subscribe for more stories that inspire reflection and change. Together, we can build a world where dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right.